Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we're the Quantum Mechanics. We're the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everyone in between. More UFO stuff this week from News Nation. They got this really interesting audio from a US military pilot. And in that recording, he sees a dark football-sized object, I think like an American football-sized object, pass under the plane's wing at high speed.
That's very Foo Fightery.
Yeah, and then I think it was the military plane was a specialist plane that has, it wasn't one of the big ones, but they have the big radar tower on the front.
Yeah, like an AWACS.
And it's a smaller version of that. And he then picked it up on radar, and it had travelled some incredible distance in the space of about 20 seconds or something. But it's worth checking it out on News Nation. Have a listen to the audio, because the pilot's reporting and goes, it's this solid football shaped object just passed under my right wing at high speed, and they saw it as it went past.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's so much of this stuff coming out. I mean, what I read this week in one of the news sources was speculating that actually there is a known connection with Russia on the drones that have been flying over.
Really? Okay.
Which does make a lot of sense, knowing what's been going on in the last week with Ukraine. We're not going to rest on that. But all I was thinking about that in terms of our world was that would give even more credibility to Dan Smith, who spoke about that back in October, saying that he thought that these were Russian and American pieces in the sky.
Dan Smith being the remote viewer we've had on the podcast a number of times, if you're new to us. But so worth checking out some of the podcasts we've done on remote viewing, because it is a topic that fascinates us. Yes, but he was talking about that Russian connection, wasn't he, way back before all this started, or at least at the start of it.
Yeah. He made a prediction about it in October, about what would be in the news in November, December. Yeah. I can't believe it's that long ago that there was that big drone flap. And as we predicted, it's pretty much disappeared out of the news. It's certainly disappeared out of mainstream news.
Yeah. This thing that News Nation did recently, that's the first thing I've seen that looks quite interesting in the last few months. It doesn't sound like a drone. It sounds more like a small object. I guess the thing with those small objects is, it could be some bit of military equipment rather than necessarily anything alien in nature.
It could be, but look, we're never going to know unless people start doing more whistleblowing. And probably, the centre of all that at the moment is Ross Coulthard. I mean, pretty much all the interesting stuff coming out. I've still got my reservations about the egg sort of exposure.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
But, we sort of, as long as you approach it with a healthy dose of scepticism and wonder, then I think it's okay. Which is better than what people used to do.
I was going to say, Ben.
Yeah.
Would you say the devil is in the detail?
Oh, that's so much better. I wish I thought of that. I would say the devil is in the detail. I am really fascinated by stories where the devil has made a pact with somebody, or, so we've got the guy who made the pact so that he could play the violin.
Yeah.
There's been a few of those. There's a blues guitarist who's done that.
We did that, yeah.
And I've been looking this week into communications from the devil from the past and the near present, because he not only writes letters, but apparently communicates via cryptocurrency.
Really? He's gone high tech.
He's gone high tech. And before we start, I think the devil, because that is such a denominational reference to it, and we always say we don't like talking about that because it sort of implies a certain level of theology behind it. These are the words of the people at the time and what people of the church are saying. I think the other way of looking at this is a dark entity. That is probably, in some people's minds, including mine, that is what the devil is short for.
Yep, I get it.
What is known as the Devil's Letter is kept in the monastery of the Benedictine nuns of Parma di Montechiaro, which is the Monastery of the Holy Rosary, which is how we will refer to it later, because I can't say Monte Chiaro.
You said it pretty well for us, though.
I know, but I'm going to stumble if I carry on that way. And it's kept in what was once the cell of Sister Maria Crocifissa, who was born Isabella Tomasi.
When you say cell, do you mean like prison cell, or
no? So
just where she lived?
Yeah, nuns live in cells in monasteries, because I think the notion of a room is too fancy for them. And it was received on the 11th of August, 1676, from Sister Maria. She received this letter from the devil himself, who wanted to tempt her. This is the story behind it.
Yep.
And only she understood the text, which from then on she signed it with her reply, "Oh dear," and you can still see her reply.
Was it, "I'm out of milk again, sister"? Oh dear.
Oh well, we'll come on to what's in it. It's disturbing and weird.
Okay.
It was exhibited to the public on the 3rd centenary of the death of the nun in January and February 2000. So that was the sort of the first time it was pushed, and that caused quite a lot of news about this. So if you've ever heard of this, it's probably because of that.
I seem to have a loose recollection about this.
On August the 11th, 1676, the sisters noticed that Sister Maria was absent. Concerned, they hurried to find her and discovered her seated on the ground. Her left cheek was smeared with black ink, and on her lap she held an inkwell with a pen. Beneath her left hand lay an open letter, but its writing was completely illegible.
It's a bit like mine, basically.
She appeared to be struggling to breathe, and her expression looked dead.
Wow.
The sisters examined the mysterious letter, but none could decipher it. At the time when they were looking at it, Maria, in a voice, seemed to come from nowhere. Not saying it's paranormal, but unusually profound sounding for her. She said, "Alas, they say it will only be legible on the day of judgment. This diabolic memorial has been sent from hell to heaven. It cries out for justice against the unjust. Great and terrible things are contained within this accursed text.
Wow.
Alas, they wish for me to be the miserable messenger." And she remained in this state for a good long time, silent, weak, unable to stand, like weeks like this.
Wow.
She was so overwhelmed. It sounds like she was like in a PTSD kind of
shock or something.
Shock, yeah. She just stared at the ground and looked as if she was thinking about matters that were way above her normal duties of studying the Bible and praying. And when she was questioned about what had happened, she just uncharacteristically began to recount these peculiar experiences that came in dribs and drabs. They were delivered in very coherent sentences. She revealed that, having confessed a few days prior, demons had tormented her with accusations of irreverence towards her confessor. Distressed, she resolved to write a letter to him seeking forgiveness. However, she found herself unable to form even a single syllable. Suddenly, she was surrounded by a horde of furious demonic entities. As she said, they were commanded by Lucifer himself. These demons demanded that she recite a prayer calling upon God's justice. They assured her that if she did, they would witness great divine wrath unleashed upon the world. Yet despite their threats and entreaties, she steadfastly refused. Enraged by her resistance, one demon declared, "We shall compose a memorial to God, demanding the justice that is owed to us all." Obeying this command, one of the spirits seized Maria's pen and began writing. The words inscribed were blasphemous and directly opposed to God. This is what the sisters wrote.
Yep.
Once the first section was complete, they attempted to force her to sign it, and she resisted. And in an act of defiance, instead of signing, she managed to scrawl a desperate "Alas." Infuriated, the demons retaliated. One of them grabbed the inkwell and attempted to hurl it at her head. Yet, by divine intervention, it did not strike her, for it was made of bronze and it might have killed her. Later, in the dead of night, the demons returned, once again pressuring her to endorse the document. This sounds a bit like the Trump presidency.
Yeah. I'm struck by as well It was funny when you were going to get into this. I thought you were going to say she was possessed and wrote the letter, but the way you described it, it's almost like the pen was possessed and wrote by itself. I can almost like that thing in Harry Potter, that scribe pen. It's just, that's how I visualised it.
Well, we'll come on to whether she was possessed or not. This is her story.
Yeah.
Don't forget. So, what she perceived may not actually be what happened.
Yeah.
But back to the story. This time they expanded upon the memorial, adding 2 additional sections. The full content remained a mystery, as Maria refused to disclose the final 2 sections to the sisters, saying, "Do not ask me about this, for heaven's sake. I cannot and must not reveal it. The time will come when all will be known and seen." And she described a terrifying vision. From heaven to the abyss, she saw vast and intricately woven snares, a labyrinth of deceptions designed to ensnare the souls of mankind. She saw the immense danger hidden from the eyes of those who naively traverse the world, oblivious to its spiritual perils. So great was the horror of what she had witnessed, she remained in a state of shock. After some time, Maria seemed to forget that she'd even spoken of these things, and she turned to the sisters, and if breaking out of a spell, she asked, "What is new? Have I spoken to you? I do not recall saying anything at all. Perhaps I have been silent." The sisters, equally bewildered, were forced to agree. So let's fast forward on this, because this is only the beginning of understanding what happened.
Right.
In September 2017, researchers from the Ludum Science Centre in Catania used military-grade decryption software claimed to have successfully translated 70% of the mysterious letter.
Wow.
The team, composed of computer scientists, psychologists and historians, sought to determine whether the letter was a genuine supernatural phenomenon or a product of Maria's own mind. They suggest that the letter may have been the results of the nun's subconscious, possibly reflecting inner turmoil, being locked up in...
Right. Suppressed thing. We've seen this, haven't we, with the meowing nuns and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, rather than it being dictated by demons, she just may have inadvertently composed the text by scrambling languages that she'd been exposed to. Don't forget, she would have had lots of not just versions of the Bible to read, because they would have been scribed by different people, but letters, and they would have had a lot of literature flowing through where they lived. And in contrast, religious authorities, of course, maintained that the letter represented a spiritual battle between Maria and malevolent forces. The science director of the Ludum Centre, Daniel Abate, he said, "It took 4 months to decipher it, using a software originally designed to decrypt messages used by Turkish intelligence. By analysing the psychological profile of the nun, we incorporated Latin, ancient Greek, Arabic, the runic alphabet, and Yazidi script into the algorithm. The message that emerged from the code was, 'God does not exist, the Trinity is a fraud, there is only me.'" He also speculated that the nun may have suffered from a form of bipolar disorder, with the letter being a manifestation of her mental distress. Yet, he was surprised to find that despite its cryptic nature, the document contained a coherent message, with only 30% remaining incomprehensible. Curiously, after the translation was publicised, numerous leaders of satanic sects reached out to the researchers, believing that there was a more dangerous hidden message there. So it did attract the attention of, the church and I suppose the anti-church.
And the anti-church. The other thing I was thinking, what an amazing project to start. You imagine working on that right from the start. You've got this letter. It's got so much... It's so important in that sense and so mysterious to be in a project where you're going, we're going to try and decode this. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, as sort of a direct translation of where they got to, humans are responsible for the creation of God. This system works for no one. God thinks he can free mortals. Perhaps now Styx is certain. That's a reference to the river Styx. God and Jesus are dead weights. Very peculiar, very... I guess to write that when you're a nun in the middle of a nunnery in that time, that's going to be slightly dangerous, really.
Yeah. You sure she wasn't possessed by Christopher Hitchens. He's done quite a few speeches of that sounds like his work rather than the devil's, I think, his kind of anti-religious work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you suddenly lose your faith, either because you've just come to that conclusion or because you're suffering from a disease like bipolar, you wouldn't be able to tell anybody. And I guess what he's alluding to is if you write it down to express yourself and then you go, well, the demons made me do it, that does exclude you from heresy in a way.
And if it's in code, they obviously don't know exactly what she said.
Well, that's right.
At the time.
And lots of historians think that because she was quite young, Isabella the girl didn't much enjoy being Maria the nun and wanted to vent her frustrations. Yeah. And she might also, they speculate, have been a linguist, and no one else knew that she learned ancient Latin, Greek and Arabic on her own because, it was completely possible to do it, but she just didn't make a thing of it.
So it's almost for her, it's either a conscious or subconscious expression, and she's almost created a multi-language cipher.
She created her own secret code. That's exactly right. Yeah. And that would be something that you could do if you were clever and had all the time in the world, which is what she did. Yeah. There's another psychological explanation, which is schizophrenia. Yeah. Religious hallucinations are the most common type of hallucinations when you have schizophrenia, and auditory hallucinations are experienced. That's part of the disease.
Which would explain the demons in that sense.
Yeah. And with schizophrenia, you're also sometimes you're lucid and you're able to tell when things are real or not, and sometimes you can't. And her fainting and screaming near the church's altar, which is what had happened, may be due to slipping out of lucidity. It is impossible to make a posthumous diagnosis of her, so there's no confirmation that it was a mental illness. Yeah. But she knew something that we didn't, whether that was in her own head or she had really captured something.
I think it's interesting as well, back to my point about it wasn't she was possessed, it was the pen writing itself. I don't know at that time, but I would have thought if she'd have said I was possessed, the outcome, like exorcisms and various other things, might have been more severe for her than, do you know what I mean? Almost.
Yes.
This is more paranormal, as in, no, it was the object that was taken over by some kind of demon rather than I was possessed.
We've seen this before. We've done stories where in that particular time frame, there has been a battle between the church and scholars and doctors of as to what has happened, and the priests want to drive out the devil and the doctors want to see what's wrong, and you end up being pulled from pillar to post. And it's very possible that she was just intelligent enough to realise that and maybe she just wanted to rock up a stir. But the reason that it is still so mysterious is because the cipher, having to use military grade technology to decipher
to get through it.
I mean, it's probably most likely that she was an incredible, just a great thinker and very clever, and that is completely possible. And I think when we look at these things, we always assume that a simple nun who's moved into a cell and she's just reading scripture all day, how smart can she be? I think that really denigrates her and the society she was in.
Interesting what the 30% says, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it might just be gobbledygook. It might just be gobbledygook. Yeah. But that is not the only time, of course, that the devil has tried to communicate. Robert Johnson, that's the name I was trying to think of earlier. But there's been quite a few incidents, and there's another gentleman we're going to come on to who's made his life's work warning people about the devil in technology, and he's got some very compelling evidence. But I collected a bunch of things that has happened since the year, since we've started using technology. So when the emails first came out, there were lots of pranks played on people by sending emails allegedly from Lucifer or Satan. Right. Because back then, do you remember, you could register any email address in the world pretty much. There were loads of email addresses coming up. Like the reason why everybody had a Hotmail one was because that was sort of Like that was one of the first, but there were so many sites where you could sign up to be, like lucifer@hell.com. You could get those.
Yeah.
And that led to, there was a hell email chain letter which happened in the late 1990s. And it was reported on internet forums, bulletin boards. Gosh, I remember those. And they were receiving emails from an address containing references to Lucifer or Satan. And they contained cryptic messages, Bible passages, and threats about eternal suffering. Some of the people claim the emails referenced personal details that weren't public, adding to the fear factor. So there's one case I've got here from America. A Jean Crompton in 1999 posted on a BBS forum that she had one of these emails out of the blue. And don't forget, this is a very early time in emails.
Yep.
This email specifically named her cat, her son, and the registration plate on her car.
Right.
And said that she was basically in for a bad time. She didn't say what it was, but she said it was threatening. And of course, a lot of the replies were, well, that is probably just one of your neighbours.
Kind of like a poison pen letter.
A poison pen letter. It's another way of doing it. Yeah. And this is pre-phishing, really, PHI phishing. Yeah. So they're more likely to be hoaxes or what we would now call phishing, but in that case, it might have been an extortion. She didn't mention it was an extortion, but it's possible.
Do you think the devil gave up when spam filters came in?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he just keeps ending up in junk. Yeah. Then there's a case of the email from hell. 2012 this was. A man in the UK claimed he received an email from his recently deceased friend warning him about a demonic presence. The email was written in a strange, archaic language and referenced details only his friend knew. Now, the police got involved with this, and they thought it was a hacker, but they couldn't work out who it was and how they could possibly have got all of this information. And a bit like our original letter, some of it was undecipherable. So he sort of went on to believe that it did have a supernatural explanation, but again, the police discarded it and said it's just someone messing with you.
Bit of a sick prank, though.
Yeah.
It involves, a deceased friend of his and personal details. It's quite vicious, isn't it?
Yeah. There's also been, of course, we've got AIs. There's an early AI experiment which has been widely talked about on Reddit and 4chan. This goes back to the mid-2010s. And it was designed to generate responses from the perspective of the devil. And users claim that the AI gave eerily personal responses and seemed to predict events. I've got no verifiable proof of this, but it became known on Reddit as the digital demon. And there are apocryphal tales of encounters with it, but it's I had a look. The stories are really only, oh yeah, my mate was on there. Oh yeah, I was too scared to log on, but I heard it did this. Right. So I haven't got any specific data, but that was quite interesting. And another one, which I don't have any specific details on, but there's a legend about a Bitcoin wallet controlled by a dark force, and people claim large amounts of crypto are moved into patterns resembling occult symbols. But I think that one might be a hoax.
Right.
There is one that isn't a hoax, and this is interesting. This is the I Am Lucifer emails, and they were sent to a professor at UC Berkeley, Dr. James Montgomery, and he claimed to have received a series of bizarre emails from an unknown sender who identified themselves as Lucifer 9. The emails contained cryptic warnings about the end of days, referencing again biblical texts and apocalyptic prophecies.
Hold on. Lucifer. I just got this vision. Lucifer's there. Let's go. Oh, I've got to get a handle. Yeah, Lucifer. Oh, you're joking. Lucifer 1's gone. Lucifer 2's gone. That's so
I know
funny.
What you mean. I know what you
Lucifer
mean.
9.
Yeah, at least it wasn't like Lucifer 2374276. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No. He attempted to trace the source, but found that the messages were sent from an email account that didn't exist. Well, again, that isn't too difficult. It's not too difficult because you can spoof email addresses. And again, it was considered that perhaps this was social engineering, perhaps it was a hacking system. But what is interesting is that the professor documented his experiences and later stopped discussing them after he received what he called a final warning email. He was scared enough to stop talking about them in public. An interesting something that has happened when we talk about AIs and people encountering things online, that, you know, the Philip experiment, which we've spoken about before, where people created a ghost. So it's possible, some people say, that the same thing can happen with AI. If people start feeding it data, which is, you know, about satanic things, it suddenly starts to behave that way, not through any paranormal means, but just because it becomes the Philip experiment of the internet.
Well, it's interesting. I saw a very short documentary. I think it was hosted by Stephen Fry on AI, and he was talking about that. I think it was that active AI one where it backed itself up when it wasn't supposed to. And
oh yeah,
there's another one like that they mentioned on that, where they got the AI to play the world's best chess computer, and the AI was losing, so it reprogrammed the game to give itself better pieces, like two queens, so it would win. But there was a whole point in there about AI will do whatever it needs to be more efficient at its task. So if that's taking control of more power, or, you know, in an extreme sense, you know, eliminating humans to help the environment, it will try and gather power because that's in its programming. But so it's interesting what you're saying there, because it's almost like if someone is asking for something satanic in origin, or then it's going to try and adapt to that, because that's what it's being asked to. That's what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
I've now got this vision though of Satan trying to remember his password. Oh, was it Beelzebub 666? I can't remember. Was there an exclamation mark? I've got to do two-step authentication. I'm the devil, for God's sake.
It's hot in here with a 1 and a 0 instead of letters, yes. Yeah. So
Lucifer 9.
There is a man who takes all of this very seriously, and that's Father Francisco Suquia. And his views on technologically related phenomena in the context of demonic activity are kind of extraordinary. He is an exorcist by trade, but he believes that the devil, as a spiritual entity with intellect and will, can exploit modern technology to harass, deceive, and oppress individuals, adapting traditional methods to influence in the digital age. His claims stem from first-hand experiences using exorcisms and consultations, though they're presented through the theological lens rather than the scientific one. So he argues that the devil doesn't need to physically manipulate devices, but can influence them sort of through preternatural means, so like a divine power. And he noted that this has happened extensively since the year 2000, when technologically we've become just more reliant on it. And he sees all of the platforms that we use, the social media, the internet, as amplifying the ability of the devil to expose us to sin, occult practices, pornography, violent content, and New Age rituals. He believes all of these invite spiritual oppression.
It's a bit satanic panic 2.0.
Oh, it is.
It?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I get where that comes from. If you're scrolling through that stuff, I could see why you would regard it as a threat and then make an argument of somehow there is. So is he saying it's not literally a possession of the technology? It's just more
it's a manipulation.
It's a manipulation. Okay.
We can see how he's thinking, really, from this 2020 interview with the Philippine Star newspaper. So in that interview, he claimed that demons can send text messages to torment people, and he cites cases where individuals have received disturbing messages after exorcism sessions. For example, he described a scenario where a possessed person's phone would receive text with cryptic or threatening content from unknown numbers, or even numbers tied to the victim's own contacts, implying this manipulation beyond coincidence. He didn't provide any technical details or call logs to the journalist who was interviewing him, but he framed this as demonic intelligence and not random glitches.
So again, he's not saying someone gets possessed and then fires off this stuff themselves.
No.
He is saying literally there are demonic forces sending the emails, doing the content, whatever it is. Yeah, okay.
Now, there is something of a problem with this, because we'd like to see screenshots and call logs.
Yeah.
But in a 2021 interview, he elaborated that these messages vanish after being read, leaving no trace, a phenomenon he attributes to the ability of the devil to mock physical reality.
I manage his inbox.
Yeah. And my heart sank a bit, because then you're like, right, well, with no evidence and only hearsay, it does become a little bit weaker.
Yeah. Well, you could take screenshots of it, can't you?
Well, yeah, exactly. But he also says that everything around technology that we have been curious about, like phones ringing with no caller, screens displaying odd symbols, devices activating without human input during prayer sessions.
We had that one with the computer on a plane the other week, didn't we?
Yes.
That was sending weird messages, yeah.
Well, we've had it with our own cars opening their windows.
Yeah, true.
And he puts all of this down to demonic sponsored activity.
This podcast brought to you by Demonic.
No, it doesn't fit with Madonna. He sees that social media is a vector for this demonic influence, and he links this post-pandemic rise in cases of possession, which he says there have been, to online exposure during the COVID lockdown. He argues that TikTok, YouTube, they host occult challenges or esoteric tutorials, and they lure people into practices that open them to spiritual attack. And he talks about how algorithms are there to amplify evil. And this is where we start going, oh, okay, I'm not sure I'd want to be stuck in a bus with you.
Well, I get you can make that argument of the impact of social media and isolation and everything that happened during lockdown and COVID, but yeah, it feels a bit jumping the shark to then go, well, that's because the devil's controlling it all, you know?
Yes, yeah. No, exactly. So he sort of says he has personally dealt with, he calls it the texting demon.
It's any teenager, isn't it?
Well, yeah. He describes a young woman who she sought his help after receiving nightly texts with phrases like, "You can't escape," from a number that telecoms later confirmed was inactive. And during her exorcism, her phone buzzed repeatedly with no visible sender, stopping only the day after the rite concluded. Wow. And he saw this as the demon taunting both the victim and the priest. Now, this, seems very similar to other people who describe a similar situation, but it comes from, for example, their dead grandmother's telephone number, or the house down the street where nobody lives, but a bloke called Terry died there in 2000, yeah. And then they get these messages on the phone and all they can hear is, Terry.
It's reminded me also of EVPs. There's something EVP about it as well. Do you know what I mean? It does create a narrative of, if you go with it, that because you kind of go, well, how could it manipulate an EVP? Why isn't it doing other things? But he's saying it is doing other things, manipulating phones, emails, whatever it is. Yeah.
So we see this on a lot of those YouTube ghost hunting videos where a family's television is turned on and off and static comes through. Well, he says he had a case where the father of this particular family was being demonically possessed. And it's important to note that I always thought about a demonic possession as being almost like the horror movies. So the person starts speaking in a unnatural, sort of deep, guttural voice, saying things that they couldn't possibly have known, speaking other languages, walking backwards. Well, he says actually the first signs of demonic possession are things like bad luck happening to you. So you get a blowout in your car, or you drop something hot down your front. All of these things, he says, are the beginnings of the spirit playing with you. And that's why, like, when you read some of his accounts sort of glibly, they appear like, what are you talking about? So he said this dad had been
dangerous in a way, though.
Oh yeah, very dangerous. Yeah, that's why he's going to take it seriously. This dad, who he's been called in to exorcise, he owns. He described it as one of the first smart TVs on the market, and during the exorcism, it was unplugged, but it kept being turned on, and not just showing static, but it showed horror movie scenes. Right. And he does actually say, and this sounds very much like a sort of a puritanical thing, although reading some of his interviews doesn't come across this way. But he said, watching horror movies can be a way for a spirit to get into you. It's kind of like it seeds the idea that something can happen. And once you've had that idea, it's a little bit easier for the demon to get in.
Sounds a bit more satanic panic in a way.
It very much is, yes.
Because I think the flip side of that and the dangerous side of that is you could end up with somebody with, let's say, misplaced deep faith going, well, I don't like the way my teenage daughter or son is behaving, and they're always on their phone, and look, he spilt his Starbucks on him, so we need to get him exercised. You know what I mean? That's the dangerous side of this, isn't it?
Yeah, it completely is. Yeah. And when it comes down to it, he's got a lot of followers, but what he's really talking about, like, you can see the similarities between, I guess I wouldn't say they're his teachings, but his warnings. Yeah. And he describes modern technology as being like the snake, the serpent in the Bible that the devil managed to manipulate. That's the way he talks about it.
So basically, God needs to get, a better social media team, doesn't he? Isn't that the logic? Oh, unless God's responsible for the cat videos that everybody loves. Is that, you know what I mean?
Of course so, yes. Well, I suppose what he would argue is that with...
The technology itself is evil?
No. Not the technology itself. It's a tool that the devil can exploit. Right. But, he would argue that divine entities wouldn't exploit technology that way, because that's not how they work. But I would say that but some people have looked into his claims from a tech perspective, and his lack of evidence is unfortunately overwhelmingly, let's just say, disappointing, because as you say, screenshots, photographs, all we have is him saying these things.
This thing happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm not undermining him. I'm sure, like, he's very, very, I guess, he believes what he believes, and these things may or may not have happened. But if we go back full circle to that letter, when we talk about emails and modern phenomena, most of them can be put down to pranks, or it never happened, or somebody being a bit malicious. And I think we can probably say the same of Maria. Like, it's completely possible what happened to her was paranormal and she had an encounter, but I think it is much more likely the scrawlings of a bored young woman who was in a situation that didn't particularly suit her,
and some kind of potentially some kind of release from that.
Yes,
because that's where you get to with the meowing nuns. And again, if you're new to us, 1700s, a nun starts meowing in a monastery at like 11 o'clock in the morning for no reason, and then the next day another one joined her at 11 o'clock, and then the whole monastery started meowing at 11 o'clock, and then it spread all over Europe, and there was lots of, yes, it's satanic, or everything from it's satanic to it's something from God, to actually they were living in a really suppressed environment, and it was a type of rebellious release that it was pleasurable to do. And I wonder if, not the same, but this letter could be something in the similar vein.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And, you know, she went on to carry on being a nun and lived her life. Nothing else particularly happened. There is one last phenomena which I'm going to talk about in the extra scoop, which is the Zozo demonic entity.
Right.
And that is quite interesting. And we'll finish that story on the scoop. But that is what I have on communications from the devil at the moment. And
that sounds like you're going to get one.
gosh, I hope not.
Just wait for my mailbox to come in. And if you want to join us on the extra group, where we'll talk more about this and hear about the story that Ben's got, if you go to patreon.com/TQM pod, you can find us there. Cheaper than going without one coffee each month.
It's the equivalent of parking for half a day at the Westfield in Shepherd's Bush.
Okay.
As I learnt to my detriment this week.
That seems quite cheap.
Oh man, it's gone up. It's gone up. I think the devil's been manipulating those machines.
It's cheaper than being on a parking meter in central London for 10 minutes.
Do you remember when you were younger, like either when you started driving, or I remember when going there with my dad to, there was a shirt shop called Dickie Dirt's. Remember Dickie Dirt's shirt shop? Yeah, it was like a real fancy thing in the city. I'm not old enough to remember it in the 60s, but there was parking meters, and you used to have a collection of 10p's in the car to feed the meter. Yeah. And you just keep, and then every time we went there, you could fill it for like 30 minutes, and then he'd send me back out to like put more 10p's in. But you had to have 10p's. It's mad, isn't it?
Well, I remember driving up to London to go to late night cinema, and at the bottom of Piccadilly Circus, the road that kind of goes down onto Pall Mall, in between Pall Mall and Piccadilly Circus, and there was tons of parking there. We just used to drive. We used to struggle a bit to get a space sometimes, but yeah. Park for free, go and watch a movie, come back. Those were the days.
Those were the days, indeed.
That was before the devil got involved in parking. Well, that's really fascinating. I think the thing that really will stick out for me is I'd love to have been there at the start of that project where they decided to decode that letter.
Yeah,
that must have been so exciting to have the real thing in front of them going, right, we're going to put all this software on it, and then as stuff starts coming through,
that's
amazing.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. They weren't expecting anything, so it just goes to show there's more in heaven than, what's the phrase? I can't remember what the phrase is. My gran used to say it.
Than a iPhone 16.
Oh,
Isn't that it? There's more in heaven than an iPhone 16.
I've just got an iPhone 16. It's literally like...
Is it heaven?
It's very good. It's a bit too clever, though. It's a bit too clever. I had a conversation with it the other day driving back from London on Siri.
Right.
It passes the Turing test, that's all I'll say.
Wow.
Okay. I know. Maybe I'll go and have it blessed later.
Yeah, I think that'd be a thing, wouldn't it? Having your mobile phone, like... So it'd have to be a waterproof one, dipped in holy water or something.
Yeah. Well, next time we go on an adventure, I'm probably going to consider it.
Well, join us for more on the extra scoop now. Next week, I'll be a bit scripted. I'm going to be taking us underground.
Like the jam?
Like the jam, yeah.
Nice, blueberry.
Yeah.
Right, we'll see you there for that then.
Cool.
Take care.
See you later.
Take care, bye-bye.
Bye.
quantum mechanics,